Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a live discussion on my number three, getting down to my top three favorite Star Trek episode of the entire franchise. So we're up to my number three, which is of course In the Pale Moonlight. And as many people will tell you but don't believe them, it is a fake. It's a fake. But anyway, joining as usual, we got my sister Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to talking about um, this great episode of Star Trek. I don't know if we want to wait until the end for the reveal. I'm just going to spoil it. Me and Mark picked this at the same number. This was my number two. This is the only one. This is the whole top 25. This is also my number three. I did a whole hour and a half long video about it about a year ago, or maybe a little more than a year ago. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about it with you all.
And joining us is Darrin, Dancing with the Devil. Thanks so much for joining, Darrin.
Very happy to be here. Very happy to be here. Actually, happy to be here in so many different ways. One, this is a fabulous episode. I can't wait to really dive into it. Seems oddly timely for me. And also, I came pretty close for this all being gone. I'm in Altadena, California, where the Eaton fire just burned down like 90% of the town. It's crazy. If I look a block one way, it's complete devastation. I'm very lucky for whatever gods, forces, angels, circumstance, time travelers, whoever is responsible for helping this out. Very thankful. But a lot of people have been hit pretty hard. So the one thing I would say is if anybody does have any contributions they want to make, they want to look to help out victims of the wildfires here in California, the California Fire Foundation at cafirefoundation.org is a great charity. They do a lot of work and have been really instrumental in helping people get through those really rough, scary moments. So very thrilled to be here and thrilled to be distracted in kind of a very, very odd way with this episode, which is just brilliant. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with what are the choices that we like in our favorites, because especially once you get to the top five, it's all very personal. And this is such an intense, introspective, kind of morality play. There's no real huge moments in it, like space battles and breaking through and all this. It's all very mental. And I love this episode, so I'm really excited to get into it. So I'm thrilled that we all seem to be of similar minds, that this is the stuff, the meaty stuff that's really worth digging your teeth into.
Yeah, and I was very happy to hear that you and your family are safe and that your house is intact. So very glad for that. And of course, very sucks of what happens to everyone else who weren't so lucky in the fires, and grateful for everyone else who's helping them out. But yeah, so yeah, and you mentioned something about time travelers helping you out. I'm sure it was Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, and good, man. Wes, yes, you're my boy. You're my boy, Wes. Yeah.
All right. So we'll go ahead and jump into In the Pale Moonlight. Before I get to everyone's overall thoughts, I want to talk about something very important about this episode, and that is the memes. This has been called one of the most memed episodes out there. I didn't have time to put together a slideshow because I was in a hurry, but I was going to. I downloaded a whole bunch of memes of him going, "It's a steak," or "It's a rake," or one where he's even holding up like a tiny Jake Sisko and going, "It's Jake!" And one of my favorite videos, I remember watching this for maybe 30 minutes straight, just on repeat and cracking up hysterically, is a video that takes a clip of "It's a fake," but counters it with the clip of Benny Russell from the episode Far Beyond the Stars, where he says, "It's real!" So then you have them arguing with each other, going, "It's a fake! It's real!" And it's just that for like 10 minutes straight. And I still get a kick out of that one. Don't you understand? It is real! But anyway, yeah, love this episode. But anyway, first we'll start with your overall thoughts. So, Alyssa, well, we know where you had this on your countdown. What are your overall thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I had it at number 3, and for me personally, is my favorite Deep Space Nine episode. This is what made Deep Space Nine great for me, is that it was willing to dive a little bit more into the gray area of morality, and if you have a chance to save the Federation and save the Alpha Quadrant, but it requires doing something a little sketchy, would you do it? And it's not something that previous iterations of Trek, well, at this point it's just Next Generation and TOS, would have really been able to dive into the way that Deep Space Nine does. And I love the framing device of this episode with Sisko's logs. I know that people will make a lot of jokes about the Avery Brooks overacting, and I too will make some jokes about the Avery Brooks overacting in those scenes. But I still thought it was like the perfect way to frame it, because when you're first watching it, you are thinking, you're not like, the first time I watched it anyways, like I was surprised when, at the, "It's a fake," because you're expecting, oh, well, this plan is going to work. And there was a nice little twist that made that episode a little more powerful. And that's all set up by the framing device of Sisko giving his log. And so I just think it was perfectly done all the way around. And for my money, the best Garak episode, is one of the best characters in all of Star Trek. And his speech at the end to Sisko, I think, is one of the best scenes in Deep Space Nine. So I'm sure we'll get into more of the details, but I could just gush about this. I did for like an hour or so, or whatever it was, hour and a half video that I made like a year ago. So yeah, I could go on. Just one of the pinnacle of Star Trek, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I recently did a live stream with one of my Patreon supporters where we did all these quotes. We chose 58 quotes, and most of them were like, one-line quotes. But I made a point of putting that entire Garak monologue that he does at the end in there, because that quote is just so good. It's pure gold. But anyway, Darrin, I understand that you saw this episode for the first time very recently. So I'm curious if you were aware of how much of a fan favorite it was before you watched it, or did you discover that afterwards, or what your thoughts were when you first watched it.
Other people like this one? Yeah, I did see it much more recently. And I was not aware that this was a fan favorite. And I think even initially when I watched it, while it was intriguing, I don't know if it hit me in quite the same way, because it is a very differently structured episode, especially in the midst of this giant kind of war arc. This really is a much more of a mental exercise. And it's so much of an interesting morality play to see how Sisko is moving and making his choices through this, when juxtaposition that ultimately most of his choices don't even matter, because ultimately the end goal has already been decided from the very beginning of what this plan really was going to be. He just had to believe that it could go the other way. And there was a slight chance that it could possibly do that, Captain. I love Garak in this show. And yeah, this is definitely one where you're really seeing the true motivation, this true potentiality. Even the whole bit where he's talking about his friends, there's like, yeah, I connected with some people and they're all dead. I really should actually be impressed with their security bit. just the kind of objective but very realistic way that he views things, having been through all of that, and how this sort of plays all back and forth. I think the performances all around from the entire cast are phenomenal. We could talk a little bit about the whole Avery Brooks monologue bit. I mean, I think overall he pulls that off, and he really does make that work. I might have a few quibbles with some of its execution, which we'll get into. But overall, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the perfect framing, because that's what this is. We made a choice, and it ended up being the right choice, probably overall in the end. And how do I feel about that? Being that all it took was, sacrificing my, self-respect.
So yeah, I agree that this is a very different Star Trek episode, especially for the era, and that's why I was kind of so blown away by it. So first of all, when I remember seeing the promos for it for the first time, and being like, "Oh, it's going to be about Sisko trying to convince the Romulans to join the war," I was like hooked just by that premise, because that was like right up my alley, like getting back into the Dominion War, not having an episode about O'Brien being undercover with the Ryan Syndicate, or fucking Worf and Dax getting married, or Morn faking his death or whatnot. We're finally getting back to the Dominion War in a really interesting way. And I've told this story before on my channel recently about how when I first saw this episode, I was stoned out of my mind. It was like getting off work, and it was a time when I was 19 and getting stoned all the time. I got stoned to watch this, and I remember being so incredibly blown away by it, particularly the moment where, which we'll get to more later, but when Vreenak says it's a fake, like that blew me away. I was like, that doesn't happen in Star Trek. Like, of course his thing's going to succeed. Of course the hero is going to succeed. Like, of course. And when that's like, all bets were off. Like, it totally like opened my mind to the possibilities of what Star Trek could do, because I was like, this is not something Star Trek would do. And they take it further with that ending where Garrick sort of kills people and tricks the Romulans into going the war. And it was so like groundbreaking. I think in modern TV, stuff like this is a bit more common, like maybe even modern Trek. Not as much, I would say, but maybe. At the time, yeah, it was completely groundbreaking. It took Star Trek in a totally different direction. I never actually heard from anyone directly who was upset with this episode, but I heard that there were a lot of people who hated this episode because it defied Roddenberry's vision. Oh, how dare you portray our hero captain doing bad things. And yeah, I don't know. I think the reason why I never heard from those people is because they're such a tiny minority and are drowned out by all the people who absolutely love this episode.
Which is instead the whole basis of the episode is, in fact, that question. So, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
This is not. I mean, this is not the only sketchy thing Sisko ever does, too. So this the great captain thing. I said in my review, I remember, and maybe Mark, you can tell me for sure what episode it was, but I don't know if I might be spoil something for Darrin if he hasn't gotten to this yet. But there's another episode where, and I for the longest time like thought this was in this episode. There's a scene, I swear to God, where Sisko's calling like Starfleet admirals and telling them what we did, and they're all like shifty-eyed, like, "Whoa, I don't care." And I was thinking, was this episode? I'm wondering if it was the one with Eddington when he tried to poison the planet, or what it was. But I swear there's a scene that exists like that. But it's kind of feeling like a Mandela effect thing. Like, where was that scene? Because it's not in this episode. But I know that Sisko has done sketchy, like the poisoning the whole planet to get revenge on Eddington thing. Like,
yeah.
that's some other sketchy things besides this.
I can't. That doesn't ring a bell. I can't think of a scene like that.
Swear to God that exists. And someone else in one of my comments one time said, "Yeah, I remember that scene too," but I don't know. It's the Mandela effect. It happened in the parallel universe version of this episode that I watched.
Yeah, I'm stretching my brain to see if there's anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it was the one when he poisoned that planet. Might have been.
Well, I don't recall him talking to Starfleet. He had a line of dialogues that Dax says, like, "Oh, Starfleet contacted me and said they were okay with it," or something.
Yeah. Anyways, getting sidetracked.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm laughing at Norman's munch in the comment. The one concern I had watching this episode was there was going to be a fourth Waxana episode with Beta Z invaded. And yeah, thankfully we did manage to avoid that. So
I might not have minded that if it was done correctly. There was actually a B-canon novel, Next Generation novel about the invasion of Beta Z, or the retaking of Beta Z, and Loxana was the main character, like using her telepathy to trick the Jim Hadar or something like that. And it was actually kind of cool. It was an okay book.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that the Beta Z invasion thing was just kind of an offhand mention, and I'm also glad that they used the planet that we knew to raise the stakes instead of saying, "Well, Alpha Centauri 7 was invaded." Like, who cares?
Set the Alpha number 5.
Set the Alpha 5. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm glad that they did that. But anyways, we can move on.
We did miss the scene of the Jem Hadar invading and just getting really bummed out. Using the psychic powers, just feel really bad about what I'm doing. just introspective Jem Hadar just mulling around the battlefield. Yeah.
No, the Jem Hadar all went and had sex with each other like that episode. Terrible episode. Fascination, I think.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
That's the invasion of Ryza.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the episode, and I want to start with Sisko's monologue, and let's just cover the whole thing, except for the ending bit we'll get to later. But most of his monologue throughout, because we're touching on Avery Brooks' somewhat questionable acting, and to me this is the most questionable thing about the episode, but it's still amazing, don't get me wrong. But I do remember reading his review when the episode first came out. There was this website called Cynic's Corner that reviewed episodes of DS9 and Voyager, and how, judging by the name, you can tell they were quite cynical. And I remember what they said about this episode. They said this episode was amazing, despite Avery Brooks' best efforts to torpedo it with his overacting. Now, I think maybe that's a little bit unfair, because I think part of it does work, and I do love the framing of the monologues, and I think it's definitely written extremely well. The only issue that I really have of it, where I think he goes over the top, is the one where he's like, I had questions, I was going to stop it, but then there was a new casualty report. People are dying out there, and all I'm doing is struggling with the fine points of morality. No, I gotta stick with the war. Keep going. Like, he was like a bit too over the top there for me. And I think in general, I think he tends to overact. But other parts of it, I think, were just actually required that level that he delivered. And so I think overall, the episode's better with that monologue than without it. And they always say never to have narration in movies or television, but I think it actually really works so well as a framing device that if you didn't have that, I don't think it could put you in the mindset, because it is great hearing Sisko's mindset, and the fact that he's saying, "Oh, I fucked up. Where did things go wrong?" And, "Oh, this is where things all went wrong." And then so when you get to the point where Vreenak says it's a fake, you're like, "Oh shit, Roman's gonna join the Dominion War," because this is how Sisko's talking, that things are gonna really fuck up. But no, he's actually talking about sort of things did work out for him, but it kind of destroyed his morality in the process, and I love that. So overall, I'm on board with it, even though I do I'm sorry, I will criticize his overacting in certain places, but I do think it was overall great. Alyssa, let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, as I kind of touched on in my intro, I do love the framing device, despite Avery Brooks' overacting, and there definitely is some overacting. I think the people are dying. I think that is that is kind of the most egregious example. I why I'm blanking on the name of the. It's I have it in my top 100, and I'm blanking on the name of it. The episode where Bashir goes in the hologram, the holodeck, and does the James Bond thing.
Our man Bashir.
Our man Bashir, yeah. I always thought that casting Avery Brooks as a Bond villain was like the perfect role for him because it was. So that's one of the reasons why I love that episode so much, because they made him like the Bond villain, because that's kind of his acting style. It is hammy, it is over the top at times, but I wouldn't go so far to say, despite his efforts to torpedo the episode, but I would say that despite some of the hamminess and overacting that happens at times, and not all the time, I still think it worked. I think it set up a certain expectations for the viewer that makes the twist more impactful. I think if you take away the Cisco narration, I think you lose a lot in the expectations that we're having about where this is going. And I think it really adds a lot and adds heart to the story, even if some of it is overacting. I still think it does like add a little bit more emotion and heart to the as he's telling the story from his point of view. So I think, and it's been over a year now. I can't remember specifically what I said, but I did talk about this in my video where I do think that I think the episode loses a lot if you were to take that away entirely. So we just got to laugh at the people are dying and then those sorts of things and just kind of roll with it. But I still think it overall it's better with this than without, even with the some of the overacting.
Darrin, your thoughts?
No, I actually do think that this framing works for the episode because it is a morality play. It's an internal struggle with choices. And so the fact that it is effectively framed with Avery Brooks, contemplating telling this story, reliving this, playing it out in his mind once more to try and sort out a way to move forward with it. I think it does work really well. And yes, Avery Brooks gets a little big at times, just occasionally, maybe a tad on the melodramatic edge. But honestly, the biggest problem that I have with this is kind of like the inconsistency of the framing, the idea. We see that he is doing a personal log, and this is sort of how this is all played out. And as the scene opens up, I think Star Trek does occasionally run into this, and I think it's probably just because of its era, feeling like a play, feeling like it's a black box theater type of thing. And this starts out and very much has a feel of like that black box theater where it's just him. And then, the spotlight's going to go off of him across to the other side of the stage. And the scene's going to pop up and it's going to happen, or he's going to wander over. And as the rest of the cast comes in, those types of ideas. And that I think is just part of just the structure and time of the program. And I do like the idea of this. He's addressed. I guess the problem is I'm never entirely sure is he addressing. Is he talking to himself? Is he talking to the camera? Is he talking to a log? And I think when he is addressing the camera and forward, and like he's telling the story to you. Okay, so you're the one that I'm going to relate this to. The general audience is like, I go over. I'm talking and I'm gesturing this way. And I think that is when the moments work the best. But occasionally they will just do a shift of camera angle And then he's still talking forward, still gesturing, but I'm like, but where's this point of view coming from? Are you breaking the fourth wall or are you not? Are you talking to the camera or are you not? And this is a freaking minor quibble. Seriously. But that's the only thing that kind of throws me off is through the episode. That inconsistency changes how I'm feeling with the intimacy that I'm having these moments with Cisco, and thus I think it changes whether or not that melodrama emotional bit actually works. If he's talking to me, I think it's a little more effective because he's made this relationship telling this story. The minute they change the camera angle, and I know they do that just because they've got to have cut points. You know, this is how television works, man. They're gonna have a month to try and get the scene just right. Like I said, it's the only thing that kind of occasionally throws me off of and goes, this could have been better. And I think it hampers what Brooks is trying to do. So that would be kind of my only real quibble on it. But honestly, I think for the most part, it really does work, especially by the end, which obviously we will get to again. That's when it really, I think, pays off doing this framing.
No, I think you definitely have a good point about it being very theatrical. And an episode I'll be talking about in 2 months is also very theatrical, I think. So I think that and I think Star Trek has always had, like Dorada's sister, especially getting back to Shatner and his overacting. There's always been like a theatrical element to Star Trek, but sometimes they lean into it a bit more. And I think I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think when I initially saw this episode, it did kind of throw me off a bit. But overall, like once I think about it and reconcile with it, I think I see it as Cisco like being so like overwhelmed with emotions and bottled up and disgusted with himself that he needs to go out and lay it all out. Now, I think that's where Avery Brooks is overacting. It's just a tinge of a problem because he like makes a big deal on screen, like and if you're talking to yourself, you normally wouldn't like. I think it should be more introspective, but there are elements to it which I think are, particularly in the ending, which we'll get to, that are like really introspective. And so I think it's meant to be him just kind of lay it all out to try to, assemble it and justify it in his mind, which is where he comes to eventually at the end. So it's a really good journey, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in universe, it's definitely, obviously he's recording a log, and I think it is just him trying to talk it out to himself. But like but you're kind of mixed in with then for the television viewing audience, that's where he's like looking at the camera and point. And I wondered for a while, it's like we don't usually see them recording logs, though. Anytime they like go to another ship to see like what happened to it, like the ship destroyed or something, they always look at a log and you see the captain talking, and I'm like, but they don't normally do visual logs. So like I struggle a lot with like, is he because usually you just hear the audio logs, but like he must be recording a video log and the camera is right there, and that's the in-universe explanation. But really, it's like, I mean, it's for us. It's for the audience, simultaneously with it's for him to get all of his thoughts out. But the way that he looks at the camera and gestures and everything is for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just like I said. Sometimes is he talking to himself? Is he talking to us? But you're right. We never really see these types of things, so it's like, okay, how do your logs actually work here, folks? Their screen is it just?
I'm just realizing this now. We very rarely see our characters record logs, but usually for plot convenience, if they need a log from another ship, they see the captain sitting there giving a log. So I don't know how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. We found an inconsistency in universe. No.
Yeah, there's been other episodes like where they listen to logs and it's just audio. like whispers, O'Brien was listening to everyone's logs, and it was all just audio.
Yeah, they've done that too, but like they go into like I'm trying to think of an example, but
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's I can think of one. What's it called? Is it Contagion from season
yeah,
2? When they get the logs from that other captain from the other
I think it was the
sister
Yamato. Was that the
ship.
Yamato?
The Yamato, yeah,
Yeah.
the Yamato. And you see him sitting there, personal log, and you can see him talking.
Yeah, yeah, and the one what was the one? I think anyone where anyone like the crew goes crazy or something. You watch the captain.
Oh, like
night,
yes, night terrors as well. Yeah.
Starting to go crazy. So it seems like kind of a plot conveniently thing because it wouldn't really necessarily work with just audio, but we don't really see our characters recording visual logs. But I think that's what I kind of made the assumption that that's what Cisco's doing. He's recording a video log. Given what happens at the very end, I don't know why he would need it to be a video log, but whatever.
I always assumed it was just an audio log, but maybe it is visual, and that's just him like gesturing.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of me trying to rationalize why he would be like, whoa, like camera. Other than like that's clearly for the audience, but like what's the
well, that is the real answer.
Yeah, in Starfleet, all logs are only voiceover.
No, so the answer is that sometimes Starfleet logs are visual and sometimes they're audio, depending on what the plot of the episode requires. Basically. Anyway, all right. So I want to move on to talk about Grathon Tolar. Is it involving some Orion girls? like I thought this was like a kind of character that we typically get in like the Quark stories or whatever, and I thought it was a really sort of interesting introduction to it. And this is part of the thing that he's supposed to be this master forger or whatever, and that Cisco had to take him from it was about to be executed by the Klingons and had to take him from that. But I feel like that's part of why Garrick chose him, is because no one would miss him because he was going to be executed anyway. And so I think Garrick kind of knew that he was going to kill him at the end, or at least that he might have to. But it was weird having him like sort of do the forgery and like not take it seriously, and then Cisco having like another bit of kind of over the top acting when he's like, "I'll nail you to the wall," like he's like screaming and holding him up, which is actually a great moment. I love that. And then of course there's also the moment in Quark's where he assaults Quark, and then Quark is like, "Oh, I'm pressed charges," and Cisco is like, "What would it take to convince you not to?" And it's like, "You're offering me a bribe! Oh my god, this is the best day of my life!" Like, that was a really good use of Quark too, because usually it just pops up for like comic relief, and I suppose you could say it's a little bit of comic relief, but it really hammers home in the episode that Cisco's having to freaking bribe men. And that's something he says at the end, is I had to bribe men to cover the crimes of other men, and just how it just sinking down the hole. So yeah. Anyway, so Darrin, we'll start with you this time with thoughts on Grathon Tolar.
Sometimes you just need a disposable forger. And did I say disposable? I didn't mean disposable. I mean disposable in a way of like, we won't need him again afterwards for any breathing. No, he is great. And to me, he is beautiful in the fact of really, I'm always going to bring this back to Garrick, framing Garrick as the dangerous individual that he is. Because as slimy as Tolar is, the moment that he mentioned that Cisco says, "And I'll have Mr. Garrick stop by your quarters." Garrick is here? I'll go back to my quarters. I'll be fair. It's like the instant shift right there. It just tells you all that you need to know about Garrick's danger level. I mean, like, not that we really have to guess that at this point in the series, but it's no. I think that's why he works so perfectly well. And you're right. He's already destined to be executed. So they're just using him before that sentence is carried out. I mean, Garrick is really, again, he's doing the Klingons a favor. He's making use of this person for the Federation before his timely demise. And yeah, having be effectively somebody who can easily be got rid of and will not be effectively missed at that point. Just layers it perfectly. But yeah, and I did love the fact also, just to mention the Quark thing, is this is just a great thing of having this type of character around for so long. With all of his excitement, he still keeps it low key. He still knows not to make a big thing of it. He just, makes his little statements. This is what I want. And by the way, I just want to thank you so much for reinforcing my belief in, rule of acquisition number 84 or whatever it is. It just was kind of that perfect thing where you're right. This is a great way to use him, and he doesn't have to be over the top. And in fact, his subtlety makes it much more effective because of it.
Yeah, I thought this character was really effective to show how Sisko is really starting to cross into that moral gray area. Just having to deal with this really slimy kind of character. Before you get to the reveal at the end, you're starting to already, and combined with Sisko's log, he's starting to talk about that. How he's starting to feel uncomfortable with where he's what he's doing, and you can really just see that with this character that Sisko has to deal with in order to accomplish his means. He's dealing with really shady characters that he wouldn't normally want to be associated with, and I thought so this character was really effective for that. And then that's reinforced by that Quark scene. God, I haven't watched this in a year. I should have watched it again, but I feel like this Quark also says something like, "I'm so proud of you. I knew you had it in you." Or
yes. I think the exact line is, "Captain, I knew you always had it in you."
I think he maybe said you have a little Ferengi in you.
Yes, a little Ferengi. Yes, and there's somewhere. Yes.
I believe he might have said that you have a little Ferengi in you, which really reinforces that idea. Well, Sisko is really getting into that moral gray area. Quark is saying he has a little Ferengi in him. Like, that's not good. Like, that's not actually a good thing for Sisko. And it just reinforces that Sisko's like struggle with this morality. And how he's kind of starting to push that line, starting to get close to crossing that line a little bit. I think all of that is really effective in showing that, building up to what we get later in the episode. So I thought this character, was really, really an effective. It was a really good, effective character to use to forward that kind of morality, the moral gray area that we're dealing with in this episode.
Well, yeah, because he's kind of like the perfect gateway, moral crosser. Because, to get him, we got to use this forger. Oh, but he's being sentenced to death by the Klingons. Well, that's easy to one. I'm going to save his life. Saving his life from the Klingons, good choice for Federation. Morally, I feel good with this. Yeah, I don't like helping slimy people. It's a good entryway into sort of crossing those moral barriers. And what's the next one? Oh, he tries to kill Quark. Well, Quark's not actually really damaged. It bounced off his his breastbone, and it was just really more superficial, and there was some blood. But, well, Quark, yeah, I know Quark. He's kind of a pain in the butt, but I'll give him his stuff. I know he's a smuggler. I can cross that line a little bit more. All the way to the point of like, I need 200 liters of biomimetic gel. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, I need 3 gallons of crack, and I need that mixed in with napalm and some sort of nerve agent. Yeah, it's kind of the perfect thing. So by the time he gets to that, it's like I've already crossed the line. Was it the but that fallacy argument, when you invest so much stuff into a thing, it's hard.
Sunken costs
fallacy. Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of the moral thing has gotten to the point. I've already crossed all of these lines. I might as well wrap it up, and make these big final choices. So yeah, I think Tolar is perfect in his representation of, well, doing the wrong thing at least saves a life. It's an easy entry point. And by that point, then he's already in it. And he just has to stick with it until it's over with.
Yeah, so along the same lines, and I totally agree. I think it's a great way to put it, the sunken cost fallacy, and that's pretty much what Cisco describes. It's like, hey, whenever I had a doubt, I just shoved it out of the way and kept moving forward. But yeah, along these same lines, there's the scene is I think it's one of my favorite. Or like I know I can say that about practically every scene in this episode. It's one of my favorite scenes because there's so much good about this episode. But something I love is the whole biomimetic gel thing. That Garrick, the way he's like, oh yeah, and by the way, in order to get this impossible to find rod, we absolutely need to get biomimetic gel. And I like Cisco at first is like, no, absolutely not. And Garrick's like, oh, then we'll have to forget the whole deal. It's like, okay, let's forget it. And it only takes him a couple of seconds. Like, how much does he want? Like, that was such a great moment. But what I love about it is the Bashir's reaction to that, where not only is Cisco having to lie and cover up, he's having to order Bashir to do it. He's like outright refusing to. It's like, no, absolutely not. Won't do it under any circumstances. Like, that's an order. It's like, I want that order in writing. It's like, I thought you'd say that. Here you are. Like, that was like a really great scene. And I love that the scene that Cisco and Bashir butt heads like that. And Cisco, of course, wouldn't reveal to Bashir what it was for. And I just had to talk briefly about the history of biomimetic gel in Star Trek because I've been noticing it as it's popping up. Now, there are some episodes that do treat it like a really controlled substance, like that's very dangerous. Like there was an episode in TNG where they thought the Ferengi might try to steal it from a supply ship. And there was an earlier episode in season 3 of DS9 with Bashir and that telepathic alien guy who invaded his mind. What he was trying to get was biomimetic gel. But then there's like a couple episodes of Voyager when they're just like handing it over to the random alien species for like, here you go. Like, what are you doing? But so there's Trek's not always consistent with that. But I do love how it was used here and just what it is.
Trek's not always consistent? What?
I know. Who would have thunk it? But anyway, Alyssa, I'll start with you and your thoughts about the biomimetic gel.
Yeah, no, I would just kind of echo what you said about I love how it forces Cisco to have to give a sketchy order to someone like Bashir, who definitely is going to protest it. And I love that Cisco was prepared for that, like, because he knows his officers, he knows Bashir wouldn't want to do that, and nor should he. Like, if he had every right to protest that, again, it's just adding into this Cisco is just getting deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole, and just really building that up. And I really love that about that episode. And this episode, and that's like another step toward that, now having to give his officers really sketchy order. And I love, I love that scene between Cisco and Bashir as well. I don't really have much else to add to it. I just kind of really agree with you on that one. So I'll pass it over to Darrin, get his thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, the interesting thing with this one is this is one of those things that kind of like reinforces the idea that doing the right thing is always an appreciated choice. I thought you'd write this writing. Well, okay, but I'm also going to file a complaint with Starfleet and put this in my official log. Well, that is your right to do so. You go right ahead that. It's like you can do these things that are the right things to do to stand up and hold on to your moral character amidst the rest of all of this. It's one of the things that Star Trek does nicely and shows that this could be rewarded. Obviously, in our world, Bashir would immediately be fired and replaced with somebody that would just sign on the dotted line, whatever it is that Cisco wanted to do. But we aren't living in this world. This is the Star Trek world that we're talking about, and this is why it's what we aim for as a larger reality. Wouldn't it be nice if doing the right thing was respected and rewarded like that? I'm sorry, what were we talking about? Right, Bashir, the biomimetic gel. No, I think that was, I think that was done kind of perfectly. And again, it's showing our stakes as we go longer, because honestly, without the big statement, we would have no idea if the biomimetic gel was actually a dangerous substance or not.
Yeah, I think they were saying it could be used to create bioweapons.
Yeah, that's basically how he was able to underline it and go, well, this is why it's so dangerous. Oh, it can make bioweapons. Well, obviously that's a bad thing. We don't want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and then I didn't mention also the fact that Cisco is, getting it to give it to a really sketchy person who's definitely going to use it for very sketchy reasons. And people, it could potentially cause other deaths. For all I know is, I think that really adds a lot to it.
But let's not forget the flexibility of this. You can make bioweapons, you can clone people, you can replace limbs. I mean, you can do so many things with biomimetic gel. What would mad scientists do with it? You almost want to give it to them to see what happens, but probably not.
Now, the thing you said about the line where Bashir says, I'm gonna note this in my log, it makes me think of one of my favorite lines from Voyager. When I can't even remember the episode, maybe someone will tell me. But when Chakotay is protesting to Janeway about something, he's just like, "I'll be sure to note that in my log." He says, "I don't give a damn about your log," and that's that's what I thought. Like Cisco should have said.
Oh yeah, it should have been. Yeah, why don't you report this to the next starbase we come across in 70 years? Yeah, that's, we needed more of that in Voyager.
Yeah, don't get me started on how Voyager was way too adherent to Federation. Anyway, like acting as if the Federation is a thing and where they were. But anyway, that's a whole topic. Yeah, no. Well, I know. I mean, I think Cisco was trying to keep it civil. I think that was the proper reaction. Like you have.
But I think that was what he was thinking in his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the whole thing was like, "Oh, you're on report." Ooh, report. Yeah. But anyway, let's. I want to talk about the Romulan of it all. So. This is an interesting thing. Like the episode begins with, the war is going terribly. They're seeing all these casualty reports, and Sisko's like, I walked through the door and I'm convinced that I'm going to get the Romulans to join the war. And this is a thing. Like, so when I believe it was the season 5 finale, Call to Arms, is because earlier in season 5, like the Romulans, Klingons, and Federation Starfleet all gathered together to fight Dominion. But when we get to the season 5 finale, they were like just revealed, oh, the Romulans made a peace track with the Dominion, peace, attack, and they were going to stay out of the fighting. And I was thinking, like, at the time, and I still think this is the case, that this was just an excuse to be like, let's not involve the Romulans in this, because the show's not really about Romulans. Let's not have Romulans involved. Let's just shove them to the side. And that's what I think it was. I think it was, a production thing to let's focus more on the Dominion and the Klingons and all that. But I think this episode was like, actually, this is something we can have fun with and play with, and we can play with them trying to take down this, peace pact. And I think it was definitely and that's what impressed me. Like they saw this opportunity to make this whole storyline, this whole episode about them. And the Romulans aren't typically featured on Deep Space Nine, to be fair, which is why I think they had that thought that, oh yeah, we don't really do Romulans here. But the funny thing is that I would say all the best Romulan episodes are on Deep Space Nine because they don't appear that much, but whenever they do, it's really good, visionary. This episode, there was an Inter-Arman Silent League's thing in season 7. It seems like whenever, because they use them so rarely, is whenever they do this, they do something really well. And I think what they did here was absolutely perfect, in that this was Sisko's solution to solving the war, because they were in a situation where they were losing, and this is how he thought it could be solved. And I think it was great that they went through, rather than the tactician way, it's kind of a underhanded way. And the way he goes, originally he goes to Garrick and he's like, oh, find some evidence on Cardassia, which I don't know. It's a debate to be had of whether or not he knew that was an impossible task. But I think Garrick knew. So I think Garrick was kind of humoring him. And I don't even know if he was telling the truth when he said all these people died that I messaged. And he might have just been bullshitting Cisco because he knew what they actually needed to do and was trying to steer him into that direction. It's like the only way we can do this is to manufacture this ourselves. So yeah. Anyway,
I just wanted to add in, that's how I kind of read it, is that I think Garrick was full of shit. I don't think he ever asked anybody anything. I think Cisco was sincere, and I think Garrick was like, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I'm just gonna lie and pretend that like all these people died so we can do the real plan now. Like Cisco is just not good at this game. That's so stupid. So that's kind of what I think.
Many Bothans died.
Well, also from Garrick's standpoint, it's like, oh, you didn't think we might have thought about that already? We would have tried those maneuvers if that was an option. No, just sitting down. Oh, actually, we do have these secrets. We were just waiting for you to ask us. Hold on a moment, So yeah, well, and it's funny because usually with the storytelling, I'm like just giving everyone their due, like, of course, this is what happened. But on the other hand, you're totally right, especially how flippant he was telling the story. Is like, I did reach out, and there were some people. It was amazing, but they're all dead now, right? Okay, so do you really want to? Maybe this is even the better gateway drug for sucking a Cisco in this sense, is to go, oh, look, you just sacrificed some people to achieve nothing. You want to try something else? Or you're really dedicated to this at this point? That might have been the really easiest move for, at least for Garrett, to really figure out, like, how committed are you for this particular path, regardless of the next casualty list on my desk. Sorry.
Yeah, so but it does make me wonder, like, what, like, if Garrick, like, so I've heard some theories that Garrick had the authentic data rod when he said that he was blowing smoke up Cisco's ass and that he could easily get one. But I actually don't agree with that. I think in this case he was telling the truth. I think in this case he did need the rod because it needed to look authentic, and he knew that it did after the shuttle explosion, and it needed to survive the explosion. So I think he knew. I think he was being honest with Cisco about the data rod and about the guy wanting a biomimetic gel for it. In that case, I think he was telling the truth.
I do too. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to lie about that piece of it. I agree with you.
Oh no, because that's getting the job done, and ultimately this is Garrick's plan. Is what actually happens, not what Cisco wants to happen.
But something I love about this episode is that I think episodes before this, like the one in season 5 where Garrett goes into the Gamma Quadrant War, for like earlier in the Dominion takeover, arc, Garrett was kind of just another figurehead on the Defiant helping out. They kind of were portraying like Garrick as like another like helpful Starfleet guy, and you kind of maybe losing track of like who he really is. And I don't think they ever did. I don't think the writers ever did lose track of who he is, but it just wasn't relevant. But then here, it's like really, it's like the stark reminder. It's like, no, this is one fucked up individual who's really,
I don't
really
think
backhanded.
Yeah, I don't think the writers ever lost track of it, but the audience could have, like, as you're watching along, because they haven't reminded us for a while. And you see him helping on the Defiant and whatnot. So this is a good like reminder to the audience as you're watching these episodes. Like, oh yeah, Garrick's kind of terrible. Yeah, I remember now. That's right.
You were talking about Romulans before, and I just had wanted to throw out the idea is I love the fact how minimally they use the Romulans in this. How they have for the big scenes to have the introduction, to have, the fact that he's talking down and, oh, you guys are going to victim, you're going to be dead in a minute. We get the big reveal moment, and that's it. And we don't see the subsequent arguments. We don't see the upset guy as he storms off and he just leaves. That is one thing I love that they covered up with Avery Brooks's, storytelling, recounting of like, they were upset and then they demanded this and then they left. I'm like, great, because after that one thing, we don't need to see anything else. And I think it was the best choice to have that focus as opposed to be distracting with other scenes. It allowed them to use their time, I think, more effectively.
I just thought of this. It's not really relevant to this, but I don't know if you heard that the original idea for this episode was about Jake going to Bajor and uncovering a conspiracy involving First Minister Shakar. And I'm like, wow, that's something that idea somehow turned into this idea, which is like only a billion times better.
They made some right choices then, steering it away from there. Good job, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So then there's the fall of Beta Z. And the other thing is that originally they intended this to be the fall of Vulcan. But they thought, oh, that's too much. Like, that's too close to Earth. That's too much of a big deal. The Vulcans are, like, too important. What other known Federation species is kind of important, but not that important? Hey, what about the Beta Zeds? What about the Betazoids? Let's just say it's Beta Z. And I think that was actually brilliant, because I agree. I think Vulcan kind of would have been too much. But having it be Beta Z, and that is something we know of, we've heard. It's where Council Troy is from. That was another bold move that I didn't expect Star Trek to do. That like the entire world would fall to the enemy. Like, I can't think of anything that in Star Trek prior to this that really went in that direction. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really nice touch. And yes, it is a good thing we didn't get an episode with Roxanne Troy hitting on Odo, maybe to follow up on this or making people horny, but whatever. But no, it was great. Like, I thought it was such a nice touch that really added to the stakes of the episode.
Well, and I think that it was also great because you're right. It's not an important enough world where we needed to see that invasion. If it was Vulcan, we would need to see the invasion of Vulcan. Beta Z, we're familiar enough, but we don't need to see that, where they can just say it and throw it off. So yeah, I think it was a good choice to make something familiar to us, but not important enough that we would have to see. They're not going to jump to Earth immediately, but they'll get to some closer planets. And from there, they can get to Vulcan,
Yeah, and Vulcan is always kind of portrayed as being like pretty close to Earth, the way that they talk about it. Oftentimes, obviously, it's not in our solar system, but by warp travel standards, seems like it's not super far away. So you're also like, not only is Vulcan really important, but it's like, wow, they're getting closer to Earth, and then it's just like, oh my God, like, this is really, really serious. It is almost like, and for it to be completely off screen like that, yeah, it would be too much. But on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, you can't have it be like some random planet that we never heard of either. And it'd be like, oh, well, I mean, like it. So Beta Z was really a great choice. And I'm not surprised at all that there's some non-canon novel about the Dominion takeover of Beta Z with Loxley and Troy as the hero. I almost probably could have guessed that without you telling me that, but that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I do think Beta Z was like the perfect choice to use for this particular plot point. I don't know though, did they ever follow up on Beta Z being, I can't remember, in this episode or another episode of...
No, I don't think they ever follow up on it ever again. I think it's just assumed by the end of the war that they freed it.
Yeah, the Beta Z's fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was Vulcan, they would have to show it at some point. If not this episode, like, so they gotta show that. Now they're going down this whole rabbit hole. So yeah, it was a good choice.
Yeah, so let's talk about Senator Vreenak. I think this. Yeah, at first, when I first saw this episode, I thought, "Oh, this is such a stereotypical character. Of course, he's going to come in like, oh, it's hard to disappoint me, and my opinion is so low. It would be difficult to disappoint me indeed." Like, but like the more I sat with, it, the more I thought of it. I was like, "No, this is actually brilliant," because I do like, and this is Garrick's like tactic is that they're not going for a Romulan who may be sympathetic to the Federation. They're going for someone who despises the fucking Federation, is the most pro-Dominion, and so if they can convince him, then you got your argument convinced. And of course, Garrick knew he was going to kill him, not convince him. But the scenes with him, I think, were absolutely beautiful, and I think the actor did an amazing job. And I've heard some people say that this wasn't a good actor. It's like, no, I could not disagree with that more. I've seen this actor before in several other things. There was on an episode of Seinfeld where he played like a psychiatrist that was dating Elaine. It was so weird for me to watch that. And then I was watching when I was reviewing The Outer Limits that he was in like one of the worst episodes of that show. And I remember when I was reviewing it, when I was watching it, even the whole time I was watching it, I was just going, "It's a fake!" because I was just distracted by how terrible the episode is. I was like, "Come on, say it's a fake!" but but I think he did a really great job as someone who was like, really high tension with Cisco, and I love the little dance that he and Cisco have when he's talking about the Romulan. Oh, this duck kind of tastes like it. It almost feels like the real thing. Almost, it's like kind of speak. It's like a Garrick like character because he's kind of speaking in metaphors about Cisco's arguments, which Cisco does have good arguments about. Oh, so you think the Dominion's going to conquer the Federation and Klingons and just leave you alone? Like that's actually a really strong argument, but it's from his standpoint not enough to like commit to full on war, and that Cisco needs more. And so I love the dance back and forth. We'll get to the titular scene a bit later, but at first I just wanted to talk a little bit about Senator Vreenak. So Alyssa, if you wanted to go first.
So we're not talking about It's a Fake yet? Is that what?
Not yet. No, I want to get to that for its own.
Okay. Yeah, well, you mean he has other lines in this episode? That's what I remember him most for. Yeah, no. I agree with you. I love those types of scenes, and I think Deep Space Nine probably does it more than any other Star Trek episode. But I think Game of Thrones did these scenes really well too, where it's just like a lot of subtext, like everything that they're talking about, they're not talking about what they're really talking about, and like that's what you're alluding to there with the how he's talking about the Romulan beverage or whatever, and just the yeah, and just the back and forth between those two characters. And I do have to say though that Cisco's argument is so strong that it makes me wonder why the Romulans would have that. It almost, I mean, not quite, but it almost makes it feel like that whole thing feel like a plot convenient thing. That why would the Romulans think that the Dominion's just going to leave them alone? But But at the same time, like I think the actor who plays Senator Vreenak like convinced me that he really does believe that, even if to me that seems like completely illogical. It seems completely crazy to have that point of view that you don't want to be a part of the war, as if the Dominion is going to leave them alone after the Federation and Klingons are gone, and now they don't have the Federation and Klingons to help them anymore because they're gone now, and now they're just defenseless against the Dominion, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. So part of me was like, would the Romulans really be that stupid? But I think something about the performance here that like convinces me, yeah, he's that stubborn. This is his stance, and this is what he's standing by. So I did buy it. So yeah, I thought the actor did a pretty good job too.
I think you guys need to put a little bit more respect on Canadian actor Stephen McHatty's name. He's been over 200 film and television productions over the past 30 years. Actually, I've seen him in so much stuff. He's plays one of the captains in the Jesse Stone films, which I just happened to have watched recently up visiting with my mom with what's his name? Magnum Tom Selleck. So
I'm
so I,
sorry, Darren, but I will never think of him as anything other than Senator Vreenak.
oh no,
He's just
perfectly
Senator
fine. No,
Vreenak from now on.
this is a brilliant role for no, it's true. It's just funny because again, he's one of those guys where it's like you're going, was that Lance Henriksen? And that's probably I think been said for him for like, since Terminator. So I gotta kind of feel for the guy. But no, I think he did an amazing job. And again, I think this is another one where subtlety works so much better than over the top. He is never big. He is never giant. He is always the same pace and the same temperament. And you can just get those little twists of, am I messing with you or am I agreeing with you? And you're like, I love the little back and forth that he gets in with Cisco, and especially when he's having the Romulan brandy or whatever it is. Oh, it's good, oh, it's bad. And you can tell as he's getting more interested, that's all being reflected to, oh, this is starting to grow on me. I think I actually like some of this flavors. Oh, no, this doesn't quite work. They can see where you've got these problems here. It's not the real type of thing. It's just, they do a brilliant kind of little back and forth with that, the way that he talks about it. And the fact that he doesn't ever get over the top and he never really gets loud works. And especially because it does have that payoff later on. But I think for that little tete-a-tete, it shows that from Cisco's point of view, he's got to woo this guy. He's got to offer something. He has to do all of the work. Vreenak doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't even have to be here, but he's willing to at least listen for whatever reasons they managed to convince him to do that, willing to see if there's any alternatives, because Romulans are smart. They are planning, they do see that things eventually end. But I think he puts out the perfect argument is like, you have nothing to offer. And at this moment, everything has been given to us and we could just see you bicker and fight and we can enjoy all of that. From the Romulan standpoint, they are in the stronger position. And I think Vreenak does a great job of playing that and not giving anything up with any of these in any of these scenes. So I think it's done beautifully.
Decorated, what was this? A decorated captain, mentor, father, and oh yes, the man who started the war with the Dominion. Somehow I thought you'd be taller.
I know. That's a perfect thing for Cisco, who's towering over him. I mean, really talk about you knocking someone down. I did love that little bit. That was perfect.
All right, so let's get into the heart of it. It's a fake. So I love how like the build up to this about how Cisco, because you get into that, you can really understand of like when you do something and just out of your hands and all you can do is wait. It's like the souffle will either rise or it will not. And I think this is when his monologue like really helps build that. It's like everything's building to this. Victory or defeat is going to be decided in this moment, and this is when I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, of course it's going to succeed. And when he comes in and says it's a fake, like I've compared this to like Ned Stark losing his head. In fact, I think it might be like an even more shocking moment for me. Like this to me would always be one of the most shocking moments in television. Like I totally, because I was such a so used to watching Star Trek where everything always goes right for the good guys, at least in very important things like this. And it was just so shocking that like everything fell apart. And I was like thinking, and plus, as I said, like the tone of his log makes it sound like, holy shit, the Romulans are going to join the Dominion. Oh my God. and it was just delivered so great. And again, I heard someone say that when he says it's a fake, that was a terrible read. I could not possibly disagree. I think it was absolutely perfect. It was the kind you need. That you can't just say, "Oh yeah, it's a fake." No, he's outraged, he's enraged, he's like so upset, and it's like, you fucking brought me here to try to deceive me, and he's gonna all show it in that one emotion. I think it really drives home like just how fucked Cisco is. And I think there's a reason why there's so many goddamn memes about it and how my people repeat it all the time, because it is such a memorable, powerful line, one of the most memorable moments of the entire Star Trek franchise. Alyssa, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's a fake. I think it's kind of up there with it's a trap. Or like Admiral Akbar memes showing him like selling burritos. It's a wrap. Like it's in that same that same ballpark there. And I do agree that for the purpose of dramatic purposes for the show, like it makes sense for him to read it that way. I do kind of I talked about in my video. I did kind of. I mean, just like taking dramatic purposes out, like in real life. I mean, if this just in universe, is he really going to say it's a fake? Like it just seems a little bit like too much for me. Like it was a little bit over the top, but it does for television purposes. For the shock for the audience, and I agree, it is one of the more shocking scenes because you're not expecting something like that to happen in Star Trek, and it is also absolutely brilliant that they go in this direction, because it shows you just how actually devious Garrick was or is, that this was never his real plan. that as bad as we thought this was, as bad as we thought it was for Cisco to be dealing with this sketchy character and Quark telling him he has some Ferengi in him, and as bad as that's actually, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And this is the scene that's kind of the catalyst for that. And it's just a really shocking scene. And then that really propels you into what the heart of the episode actually is. So yeah, sometimes I like to joke that I don't think he would really go, "It's all fake." Like, why would he people don't talk like that in real life. But for the purposes of television, I think it was what they needed to do. I think it works really well.
You get this one shot to show betrayal, Steven. I need you to give all the emotion right there and throw it right back in Cisco's face. Go! I don't know if that was the direction, but that's sort of what it feels like in that. Because, yeah, and I think this, again, plays nicely to his subtlety throughout most of that early one, where it's all contained, it's all controlled. And this, I mean, I completely agree, Mark. This is him blowing up with his frustration and anger, and you have wasted my time. You have tried to sucker me in, a Romulan senator, and you've wasted my time with this poor execution. You know, I think there's all of that. And like I said, I think it was perfect that they give him this one moment to literally throw it back in Cisco's face. And then we cut back to Avery Brooks going, and that was it. It all died. He yelled at me off, then he got in his ship and he left. And we never need to see him again. Any other extension of the scene, I think, would have lessened it. And that's one thing that I would say in more modern choices, they would have milked the crap out of his anger. So lie, I've been here this time. He would have had a whole freaking speech. And, you know, maybe if they could spin that to Andor quality, that would have been awesome. But otherwise, I think that I think this was the perfect way to do it, because you're right, Alyssa. This is now where we move to the actual morality issue of this. None of this is really what we're talking about this whole time. None of this is what really Cisco is playing with. It's what's about to come next. And I think that this was, again, I think that it was great how he did it. I love the fact that they just gave him that one moment and then they moved on, and then we could just deal with the real heart of the issue, which is Garrick and choices.
Yeah, so this is why I think this Sisko's monologue actually comes in and really works, because after all you need to see from Vreenek is that scene of him saying it's a fake, and which I still think is a brilliant performance. But I love how they cut to Sisko explaining, "Oh, Vreenek was furious. He said under no uncertain terms he was going to expose our vile treachery." Like, I think it's actually great, like as you were saying, Darren, that we get this from Sisko, and we don't actually need to see a monologue or a big whole scene of Renek going around being angry. That Sisko just quickly goes through it, and this is why, like, typically, this is why people say they hate narration in movies or television. You know, it's a visual medium. We're supposed to see, show not tell. But in situations like this, like, you got to focus on what's important. And just like Alyssa was saying, like, what this, the Romulans' outrage and his betrayal is not what's important. What's important is the morality tale, is Sisko's inner conflict. And so having Sisko relate to us, what Vreenek said, I think was the perfect choice.
Hard agree.
Yeah. Hey, you made me think, Darren, when you were talking about how on modern television there would be this whole speech. I was thinking of this this video that was out a bit ago about Zack Snyder's Star Wars, what that would be like, because it was right after Rebel Moon came out. And I watched Rebel Moon, and I was like, "There's all this like unnecessary explanation," and that's what you have, like Darth Vader explaining for like 20 minutes about it.
Now I will tell you my story so that you know it.
When I was young, I was like,
I was a young Sith.
But yeah, that's kind of, and it's not just Zack Snyder, but I think that they do tend to want to draw out those types of things, and I think that the combination of just him having that one line, that's all you needed, and then whatever extra information you need, Sisko gives that to you in his log. I think that was absolutely the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, so I love how we get like the build up to the reveal. Like, they drop subtle hints, like when Garrick is like talking to Graythan Tolar after like Sisko pins him to the wall. It's like, "You better succeed if I'm gonna make you sorry. I'm gonna tell Gowron to take his time while he executes you," which is great. But you have the moment where Garrick says to him, "Oh, just go back to your quarters. I'll be by to say hello." And so what's implied is the hello is him killing him. And that's what he was by to do. And him going, telling Sisko, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm going on the Romulan shuttle, just a plant, just a look around, see what's there, whatever. I'll be discreet, I promise." And it's funny, like, I guess you could wonder, was Sisko really being naive to what Garrick is capable of, or was he purposely like not trying to think about it or dismissing it because in the back of his mind he kind of knew that's what needed to be done. Very interesting things to think about. But yeah, so then we get the big reveal again. Another one of the best scenes, the favorite scene, when Sisko hears the news when Dax is like, "Oh, the Romulans are dragging the roar. They killed some senator." And Worf's like, "Oh yeah, some guy named Vreenek." And you see Sisko like bubble up in rage, like, "Excuse me," and just run down to the promenade and just like smack Garrick over the head. It was such an amazing moment. And then Garrick said, "If you allow your anger to subside," and he kept punching him. He's like, "You killed him, didn't you?" And like, figuring it all out. And of course, I won't do Garrick's whole speech verbatim, but it was just an amazing speech about, but when he said like, "That's why you came to me, isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I couldn't do the things that you could." I do kind of wonder if that's the case. I think that maybe Sisko was just thinking, "Oh, he's a Cardassian. I want someone to go to Cardassia, so it makes sense to get him." But maybe at first, but then once they started doing this shit, like with the rod and the biomimetic gel, I think in that kind of, he's maybe like, he has to be aware of what Garrick's capable of, and yet he didn't stop because he knew that's that wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing. But I think Cisco was definitely taken off guard about what Garrick did, which is why he punched him. But still, you do wonder if it was in the back of his mind that this is what he knew, this is what he was capable of, and it's why he never stopped it. But goddamn, that's such an amazing scene. But something else that Garrick says in the scene, he says that when Cisco asks, it's like, "Oh, you knew Grathon Tolar would fail. You just wanted to put Vreenek on the station so you could plant a bomb on his shuttle." And Garrick says, "No, I suspected that Tolar wasn't up to the task." So I do wonder if Garrick was saying maybe Tolar might succeed, but was like 95% sure that he wouldn't. And it was like, oh, maybe he might do it. But now he's, most likely he's not. So I'm just going to, blow up Vreenek. But no, I think, the whole thing of, that's, I call that a bargain. My whole screen name that I have at the moment, that this one self-respect of one Starfleet officer. And again, like Cisco in this moment, you see that Cisco totally believes them, and even says such in his log. Like Garrick is right, this is a small price to pay for the safety of the Alpha Quadrant. But we'll get to that monologue scene shortly. But I just want to talk about the big confrontation with Garrick. Alyssa, we'll start with you on this.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that's one of my favorite scenes in all of Deep Space Nine. Now, as far as whether it's true that Cisco knew that that's why he came to Garrick, because he knew he was capable of that. I mean, not consciously, but I do think that there is some truth in that. That I think that Cisco, part of him was knew inside that Garrick was capable of doing things that he probably wasn't, and that he could get things done. I don't think he was consciously thinking that, but you're right. As things continue and we go more and more down that rabbit hole, I think the reason why Cisco continues is that he knows that Garrick can do the things that he can't. Maybe not consciously, but he's driven by that subconscious, and I think that is all brilliant. And the line, at the end, I'd call that a bargain. I think Cisco knows he's right. I think that's where he that leads to that log that he makes at the end, because he knows that that's correct. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I know. I love this all so much because, again, overall, would it have been nice for it to have worked from Garrick's standpoint? Sure, but he wasn't going to put all the fate of this on whether or not Tolar could get the job done. He needed to be sure that the job was done and the Romulans were brought in. So yeah, if it had worked, great. If not, no problem. This was the real plan anyway. And I think from Cisco's standpoint, did he knowingly let it in? I think he let his own Federation optimism overlook what Garrick was actually doing. I think he did choose Garrick to ultimately, because he knew this was someone that's going to get the job done. I think he was willing. You had mentioned before that there had been several episodes here where Garrick had seemed like he was part of the Federation and one of the guys, and he was working with a team. I think that is the perfect setup from Garrick's standpoint to get this piece of work done. Cisco believes that Garrick is working like them, and maybe he's a little bit darker, but he's still part of the team. And all I can remember is when Garrick turns to face him, almost, what is it, the slang for the Cardassians, it's like, no, man, he's a snake. The way he just does that turn and look, and they've got the little thing that makes it look very Cobra-esque on top of their, in the center of their forehead, and he just lays it all out. This was the way this was going to be. You came to me in order to get this job done. You fooled yourself into thinking that I was going to obey by your rules. But I did ask, and he did ask, Are you dedicated to this? Are you willing to go all the way? And Sisko said yes. Whether or not Garrick needed to inform him of all of the parts of the plan, totally unnecessary. It was better that Sisko played the role that he did, believing that this was it. Because again, if it did work, great. But if not, he was going to make sure that the Romulans got into the war one way or another. So no, I just think that this was brilliant, and this was the perfect showcase of who Garrick is and what his capacity is.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up that exchange earlier, because I had talked about this in my review that I did, where he asks Sisko, "Are you sure you're willing to do everything that it takes?" And Sisko said yes, and I don't think Sisko quite really understood what he was saying yes to, but also in some level there was some part of him that knew that Garrick could do something this terrible. But I remember rewatching this and noticing like the look in Garrick's eyes, that like that was his green light.
Yeah,
to do what he was
exactly.
going to do. As soon as Sisko said yes to that, you can just see Garrick light up and like, oh, I've got the go ahead to do my plan now, because Sisko just said he would do whatever it takes, no matter what the cost. So that was Garrick's kind of green light into that.
Sure. And I think, yeah, Garrick was like, look, I'll be willing to try it the Federation way, but I'm going to make sure it gets done. And that's the Cardassian way, or the Obsidian Order way, I guess. You know, everybody's got their own secret police. But yeah.
And it kind of gets down to the main question is Garrick that he kind of poses to Sisko is like, you know, do you want this done or not? Like, is it more important that we keep to your morality, or is it more important that we save the entire fucking Alpha Quadrant? And it's something that Sisko wouldn't be willing to admit, which is why Garrick didn't run it past him. He just did it. And I guess it gets to the thing, it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission or something like that. But yeah, I think it is absolutely brilliant.
And he's right at the end. He's like, and all it took, we got the Romulans into the war, and all it took was some slimeball nobody likes, a Romulan senator you don't care about, and your own sense of self-respect. Would you sacrifice your self-respect to save the Alpha Quadrant? I just love how that's how he leaves it with, because that's what gives Sisko his last little moment.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get to that final scene where Sisko closes out his log, and I can learn to live with it because I can't. Oh, he has to give this cheer. I can learn to live with it because, and this now I'm thinking about it, it must be a camera. Like, why would he? Like, it must be recording visuals. But he's like, I can learn to live because I can live with it. I can live with it. Computer, erase that entire log. Bah, bah. Like, I love the music like comes in like that, and I think it was like one of the most badass ways to just end the episode, just cut the black after him just saying it, erase that entire log. It's a tad bit cliche. It's like, oh, he makes a tire log and just erases it, but it actually really works. And it really works as like a punctuated moment. You don't have a sort of soliloquy, but like an epilogue at the end. It just poof, cuts in the middle of Sisko saying like, "Nah, erase the whole fucking thing. I don't want anyone to know about it." And it because it's a perfect way to end it, because it shows how he has like come to terms with it, and it is going to haunt him for the rest of his life. But yeah, it's something that he will learn to live with. But anyway, I heard the opinion that line read was a bit off of "I can learn to live with it." That Avery Brooks read that like made it sort of weird acting choices. I'm kind of impartial to that. I think when I think about it, maybe there's a way that it could have been read that might have come off better, but I had no problem with how he read it, though. I think the way he read it was just fine. And I think it still gets across the main point of him trying to talk himself into, yeah, I can learn to live with it. So I think it was brilliant writing either way. But anyway, Darren, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I was almost expecting a third read from that when he's like, because I can live with it. I can live with it. I can live with it. I was like, you can do one more and just emphasize a different word off of this. I wasn't sure where he was going with that, but that would have been too much. That would have made it funny, and that's not really where they wanted to leave this. But no, I think that is kind of perfect. And you're right. To end it right there, right as he says, erase this log. And it erases. Boom. It's all black. Goes immediately to black, music ends, credits roll. I think that was the perfect way to kind of do it and show that this was his moment of reflecting and telling this story to know that, okay, so I've reached a conclusion. By the end of this retelling and re-examining of everything and the truth of it and having sat with it for 2 weeks, yeah, I can live with it. Move on. We're good. Don't need to record this. I could get in trouble if somebody gets a hold of this at some point. We learned that with the internet back in the early 2000s. But no, I think that this is a beautiful way. And this actually is what really, I think, sums up the strength of Avery's performance is this final kind of wrap up where he does lay everything out and see it, and he does kind of take that in, and even physicality wise you can see that he kind of absorbs that and moves on. So no, I think this was a perfect way to end this type of episode. And again, we have to end it as it began, with him pondering this question and now coming to his conclusion.
Yeah, I want to just point out Colin in the chat saying I think Sisko was trying to convince himself when he said it, and I do think that is exactly right. And I think that's really kind of the point of this whole log, and that's why I do really love this framing device, because it is Sisko like trying to process it, trying to talk through it. And at the end, when he says, "I can live with it, I will live with it," that is definitely him trying to talk himself into that. And then once he's done what he needs to do, he's gotten that out of his system. Now delete this entire log. And I absolutely agree that is like the perfect way to end this episode. Computer, delete its entire log. Cut to black. In fact, I think Trek Culture might have did like a top 10 best ending lines or something like that, and this was in there because like it is like the perfect way to end this episode. And that is, I just can't imagine that them having this episode without Sisko overacting aside. Like I just think it would lose so much. I just think that you have to end the episode that way. I can't imagine it ending any other way. With Sisko, yes, very clearly trying to talk himself into the fact that he can live with this, and that he's going to be okay. And now he's gotten that out. Yeah, let's just delete this whole fucking thing. So I don't. For one, so no one else stumbles upon it, but two, so I don't ever have to think about this again. Like I've gotten this out of my system. Now I need to move on now. And it's just so, it's so good the way that they ended the episode like that.
Absolutely, that's why it's classic. Why so many people quote it all the time.
And I'm just looking forward to see how this really has affected him when we get Star Trek Sisko in 2027. Yeah. Avery Brooks was ever coming back, but no.
Yeah. So I just wanted to address Tony in the chat saying, talking about a book called Hollow Men, which was the follow-up to events of this episode. I did read that book. I personally didn't like it. That's just me, my personal taste. I didn't think it was that interesting, but more to the point, it was released during the events of the Iraq War in 2005 was happening, and I kind of found it a little bit of a propaganda piece for that, because it seems like they were talking about there were protesters to the Dominion War, and oh, how silly are they? They're so dumb. And I felt like they were trying to AIM that made commentary on Iraq War protesters. So I was like, no, fuck this book. But I could be wrong. Maybe my interpretation is off. But that's what I took from that book. But otherwise, I didn't really think it was interesting. Like, I don't think you really need like a direct follow-up to this episode anyway. It's really good stance on its own. All right, so that is the episode. Alyssa, we already heard from you about the particular question.
Number three.
Is the only one. Yeah, the only one. There's a couple of us where we're just like one off, but this is the only one that's like the exact same number. But Darrin, so it goes to you. Where would you place this? You think number 3 is too high, around this right area?
Oh, no, I definitely put it around there, and that might be in the top 5 for sure, definitely in the top 10. This is the type of episode. It's like this and time travel are the two types of things that really tend to pull me in. When you get into those real philosophical, introspective type of stuff, the fact that this is less action-oriented and really more of a think piece, on the morality of the decisions we make in the midst of war, and what lines are we willing to cross or not cross, and what are we willingly able to, not think about, and which do we, casually, okay in our own minds with those choices. I think those are the real interesting stuff. Star Trek is always at its best when it does head pieces like this. And this one was done brilliantly. And like I said, I think the performances overall from the cast and the guest, Canadian actor Stevie McHattie,
Senator Vrinick. His name's Senator
Vrinick. I think is awesome. I mean, it really does. There's not a lot of episodes where everybody is really able to pull it off and is used to the best of their capability and their capacity in their space. I mean, even Odo, when he's weighing the lanes out of like, hey, if he's going to press charges, I got to throw this on. Here's another little moral conundrum you've got to run into because I obey the law. I'm Odo. Everything has to be by the book, and you're crossing the, everybody contributed really well with this. I think so. No, I think you got this in a great spot.
Seeing a lot of Canadian flags in the chat, so I guess they're on board with the Canadian actor. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think I totally agree. I think, and as for like the criticisms that some people throw at this episode for being against Roddenberry's version, I don't actually think that it is. Honestly, I do think there are certain things in Modern Trek that I do think goes a little bit against Roddenberry's vision, which I do think is a strong point of the franchise, and I do agree with. But I don't think this does go against it. I think it's just being realistic of what war is like and what war is hell. And that's always been the main point of Star Trek, that war is hell and something to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of what my take on it is too. But I also think that Roddenberry came up with this vision in the 60s, and like we need to expand upon that. It can't. I mean, because I do think that if Roddenberry was around, he probably wouldn't have approved of this episode. But it does at the same time fit in with his original anti-war messaging that the original series was all about. It's just a new way of doing that. It's a little more complex. It's a little more nuanced, and really gets deeper into the moral gray areas that, yes, are very much a part of what war is. So I think in a lot of ways it's expanding on Roddenberry's vision, even though if he was around, he probably wouldn't have liked it because of just how dark it is. But I mean, Star Trek is great, and Star Trek is still around now because it evolves. And I think that's why I really love Deep Space Nine, because I saw it as kind of an evolution of storytelling in Trek. And some of the old school people were like, well, Roddenberry wouldn't approve. I mean, anytime there's change and evolution in any art form, whether it be music, television, movies, you always have this is not like the old stuff, but it's actually very necessary. I see this a lot in musicians too. Like it's not very. It is actually very necessary to evolve your art. And to like expand upon what Roddenberry originally had in mind, and so this is why I love Deep Space Nine, and this is why I love this episode.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's why, all this gatekeeping with modern track being like, oh, it's not really Star Trek. It's like, see, the thing, and like, oh, Gene Roddenberry would disapprove. Well, Gene Roddenberry hated Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. And apparently he saw early drafts of Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, before he passed away, and he vowed to stop it from ever being released. Like, he despised it. That's a good movie. So we don't need to follow exactly when Roddenberry put out season 1 of TNG, which was crap. So no, I do admire him for creating Star Trek, and I do believe in his vision, but he's not the best writer.
Let's not deify Gene Roddenberry. Like, exactly. He wrote. He was responsible for season 1 of TNG, and he was the one that said, "Oh, we can't have interpersonal conflict." Like, that was him. He was also kind of a sexist asshole. So
yes.
let's not deify. Let's give him props for bringing us Star Trek and for putting this vision into place, so that others could then come and expand upon that and make it even better.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got those old scientists and next generation, if you're looking for more of a pure form of Roddenberry's vision. But DS9 is purposely set out on the frontier. It's out on the range. And you could say, this is, how does Roddenberry's vision collide with reality? How does that dealing with war? And I think this is a great episode to try and play that out. How does the Federation philosophy of trying to do the right thing at the right time and not cross these particular lines run into a reality of that's great, you're going to die if you keep doing that. Do you want to kind of shift things up, maybe try something else? That, I think, is what makes this as interesting. So yeah, it's not that, it's not just in line with Roddenberry's vision. You're right, it's the evolution. How does Roddenberry's vision deal with these types of issues? That's a much more interesting philosophical question to deal with.
Absolutely, 100%. And listening to Roddenberry talking some quotes from it, it's like he was aware like this kind of thing would in the situation, this hypothetical Star Trek universe could happen. He just didn't want his show to focus on it. But I think it's great that we have other creators who say, no, let's focus on it. And it leads to amazing storytelling like this. Anyway, sorry, you had something else to add there. No.
Good?
Okay,
I'm good.
All right, cool. So yeah, we'll go ahead and end this discussion here. Great discussion, great episode. It is not fake, it's real. But anyway, so just to we'll finish it off. If you just want to give a shout out to what's going on, of course I'd like to. Before that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Everyone in the chat. It was Colin, Brandon, Tony, Norman. Everyone. Aaron, always great to see you. And Mama Bear popped in for a bit. So yeah, everyone joining in the chat, thanks so much for joining. Everyone's watching the archives. Yeah, thanks so much for checking us out. But be sure to check out these wonderful guests. So we'll start with my sister, Alyssa. Alyssa, thanks as always so much for joining. So if you would like to give a shout out for where people can find you and what you're up to.
Yeah, I got a little channel called Alyssa Jean's Reviews. I don't produce a lot of video content anymore, although I did do a bunch in December. I covered Lower Decks. I did my award show for 2024. So for the shows that I watched, such as like most disappointing show, most pleasant surprise show, things like that. And then I did my top 10 of 2024, which is really like top 10 plus a bunch of other stuff that I talk about. This is a long video. But please check that out. You should also follow me on Facebook because I do written reviews from time to time on things that I don't make videos about, so you can hear my thoughts on other things such as Star Wars Skeleton Crew, where I did a written review on that. So yeah, come check me out. And in the near future, I don't have any huge plans, although there may be some things in the works. And I also, aside from covering television shows, I do like to speak out on trans rights and talk about my personal experience. And I have a feeling in the current times I might be doing a video or two along those lines in the near future. So just keep an eye out for that as well. So hope to see you all real soon.
Yeah, sad, difficult times ahead. Gotta fucking fight back. But anyway, Darrin, thanks, of course, as always, for joining. And yeah, what are you up to? Where can people
Well, I actually have a few things going on, which is kind of exciting. Over on my channel, this Wednesday night, 6 o'clock Pacific, this guy right here is going to be joining myself and Rob from Smirking Reviews. We're going to be talking about season 2 of Silo. Really an amazing show. Just so thrilled. My only real frustration is that I now have to wait for season 3 to come. So yeah, hopefully should be a real exciting talk like that. That's over on D's Reviews, 6 o'clock Pacific, this Wednesday. And then Friday, and every Friday for the next 9 weeks or so, at 6:30 Pacific, 8:30 Central, over on Smirking Gun Reviews, Rob and I will be covering Severance Season 2. And look out for maybe some visitors popping up in some of those discussions as well. But yeah, look, Apple's got some great stuff out there, and I'm really excited to talk about that. And then coming up March, April, probably have a few more show reviews coming up over on D's Reviews as well. So really excited for things coming up. Like and subscribe for all these channels, and you won't miss anything coming up.
So you might say that in March your channel is going to be born again.
You could say that. You could say it's D's Reviews, born again. Nice.
And then on Friday nights, I don't know if you said this in one of your posts, but you join, tune in, and get severed.
Yeah, that's how I kicked on my last one. I kind of enjoyed it. It just seemed appropriate. Yeah. So yeah, really excited about that.
I did watch your discussion, but it actually was my innie, so I don't remember.
Yeah.
I watched that work. So
the great thing about that is it gives us twice the number of views because your innie and your outie have to watch. So it's marketing for us.
And Cullen saying haven't seen Silo yet. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my name is Mark, Channels Enchantment of Eternity. Big thing coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be back here again with Alyssa, joining us to one of my favorite things to do, count down your top 10 favorite episodes of the Star Trek The Next Generation. So if you haven't left, we can leave a comment on this video, any of my videos, anywhere on my channel. Leave a comment with your top 10 best episodes of Star Trek Next Generation and top 10 worst episodes of Next Generation. I'm going to contabulate all the results, and me and Alyssa will count down and give the results, and it's a lot of fun. I believe we said we're going to be doing this live discussion February 3rd, so 2 weeks from now. So you have up until February 1st. That's the deadline to get your top 10s in. Alyssa and Darrin, you need to get it in too. But anyway, yeah,
my top 10 exists on YouTube, although I am going to alter it. So especially if we're doing worst and best. I think I'm going to alter my worst a little bit. But yeah.
Cool. So be sure to check out. And rather than my top 10, but we're going to finish my top 10. We got 2 more to go. So been doing this for almost 2 years now, getting to the nitty gritty. And I also cover Star Trek one episode at a time. Just about finished my coverage of Next Generation, which is why we're doing the top 10 in celebration of that. But I will continue with covering Deep Space Nine every episode, and going to start out Voyager in a month or so as well. So you can keep an eye on my channel for that. Be sure to check me over on D's Reviews this Wednesday. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time. It's a fair!
It's real.